how's it going? Just a little drink here. Dr. Mouth slipped through the cracks. Thanks for tuning in. I just figure it's kind of a standby kind of thing. I'm kind of thinking, because today's slip through the cracks is going to be a little hard one to do. Actually, I'm going to have a sip right now. This is going to be a bit of a hard one to do because this is someone that's, for me, for like my musical development, like I got into this guy's music when I was in high school, and he was always someone that I always thought was amazing. One of rock and roll's most interesting characters, that's for sure. Very interesting career. You know, a great part of the 60s, made music in the 70s, 80s, was very messed up at certain points in his life, had a somewhat triumphant return in the later 2000s and actually got to play live. He was someone that, he was a cornerstone artist for me. Someone I never even thought I would get to see live, though, because what had happened to him in his life. Yeah, one of those cornerstone artists that really influenced you. You have your foundation of your music base, and there's those certain artists, the early ones that really caught your eyes and really pulled you into music. For me, it's like the Beatles and the Stones and the Doors and the Who and Cream and Hendrix and all that kind of 60s stuff really pulled me in. And this guy was a guy I got into in 1981, and he just passed away right around the end of May, beginning of June this year. And his name is Roky Erickson, and he was 71 years old. Now, for a lot of you that might be watching my channel and have watched videos in the past, you probably know who Roky Erickson is. I mean, the 13th Elevators is considered among 60s aficionados, and especially those that love their psychedelic music. They're considered one of the cornerstone bands. They're considered one of the big bands in the pantheon when you make the list of all the top primo psychedelic bands of that era. They're right up there. They were from Texas. Roky was actually in a band before the 13th Floor Elevators called the Spades, and it was in that band, 1964, that he released the first song that would go on to be the 13th Floor Elevators' greatest song, and that's "You're Gonna Miss Me." And it was done by the Spades in 1964, and nothing happened. And then Roky ended up joining the Elevators with Tommy Hall and Stacey Sutherland and the rest of them. And he brought the song back to them, and they re-recorded it. And it kind of it was one of those ones started out as a regional hit in Texas, and then all the big radio stations started to pick up on it, and it actually became a bit of a hit in 1966. So, and it's a great tune. Everybody knows it. And again, if you're into psychedelic rock or garage rock, you've heard "You're Gonna Miss Me" by Roky Erickson, 13th Floor Elevators. Roky's singing is just wailing. Some have called it demonic on that record. Some of the screaming and the intensity, the emotion. And it was the introduction to what 13th Floor Elevators' character trait in their music. And they had a thing in their music that was like a signature, but it was like an actual sound. Like when you heard this sound, you knew you were listening to a 13th Floor Elevators record. And they had an amplified jug, and Tommy Hall, the jug player, he put a pickup in it and run it to an amp, and they would run it through all these effects, and he would just blow in the jug. It would sound something like, and it would just kind of go along while the song did. And they didn't use it on every song, but they used it on a lot of the songs, and it was pretty neat. So it was on "You're Gonna Miss Me," which was their biggest hit. Some people consider them a one-hit wonder band, but they weren't a band that was around a long time because there were issues, that's for sure. But they were great, and that's where Roky got his start. So I'll just show you a couple of the album covers. This is their first album, and really, this is one of the most iconic album covers of the 60s because this is 1966, pre-Sgt. Pepper, and it's really an iconic psychedelic image. The eye and the flashy colors and the strange spelling of the name and all the crazy artwork. It's definitely creating that psychedelic thing right there in 1966. This has "You're Gonna Miss Me" on it, and tunes like "Reverberation" and "Splash" is on that. And then there's this one here. The next one was a classic. This is the one that people consider their classic. I certainly do. This is their best album in my opinion. It's called "Easter Everywhere." We're actually going to play you a cut off Easter Everywhere here in a second. Great album, though. Really deserves to be up there in your top list of psychedelic records for sure. It would be in my top 10, no problem, along with Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Forever Changes by Love and Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies and all that kind of stuff like that. So great record. And yeah, let's get into some music actually here to start things off, because we got a lot of songs I want to get through. And I got lots of stuff I want to tell you about Roky Erickson too. So let's get a feeling for it. This one has the amplified jug in it as well. And it's one of my favorite tracks off Easter Everywhere. And it's called She Lives in a Time of Her Own. So how's that? Pretty trippy. I love the lyrics too. Lots of really great lyrics. Roky used to write some of the lyrics. Tommy Hall used to write some of the lyrics. So it was kind of, they would write songs together. But Roky, I think, came up with a lot of the actual music. So great rhythms, great sounds, and the crazy sound of the amplified jug. It's all right in there. Now, the next album that Elevators did after that was this one called Bull of the Woods. And it's a weird one because I don't know if you can really consider it an actual finished record. There was another set of tunes that were going to be the record before this, but then it didn't happen, and then this is what ended up coming out. And, Roky's not even on all of the tracks on this one. He's not singing on all of it. So it's a bit of a weird one in the catalog. And so that's really it in terms of the official records, those three. But there's been tons of compilations through the year. There's been a lot of live records from tapes back in the 60s. This is one that I bought way back in the 80s, and it's just called 13th Floor Elevators Live. And it's from, all it says on the back is that it was live, and it's from 1966. That's all I know about it there. But there's lots of weird live recordings floating around with them. And then there's stuff like this where people have managed to find acetates or other stuff. Like half of this is live as well, from a different performance than that one, though, I believe. And the next tune that I want to play you actually is off this record. That's Roky right there, by the way, on the cover there. This is a comp that was put together, and the first side is filled with some rarities. But the side starts off with a tune that was never on any of their actual albums, and I don't think ever came out during their career, but it has shown up on recent compilations when they've kind of gone through the archives and found everything, and it's a great tune. And it kind of epitomizes the whole feeling of what the Elevators were all about. So we're going to hear that one now, and it's called I Never Wanna Come Down.
Well, some say treasure legion, while others treasure sea. And so the wisdom spoken that each life will be unique. Some want only pleasure, who only want to please, appearing as the highest life the player ever sees. I don't ever want to come down from your village and your big town. You won't fell far on earth their throne. Well earned by the life you've been making, and not crushed by what's not your own. You stick to your own overtaking. I don't ever want to come down from your village and your big town. Encouraging only fiction, delivering in fable fiction, like unto no other. But David's and David's, and not even trouble. No careers fail. It's unicorn instant, completely dead.
All right, how about that one, eh? That is a great tune. I wonder why that one never got released at the time when they were putting out their records. That's one that could almost be on their first album. It would fit right in on their first album. It would actually fit in on Easter Everywhere, too. So, not sure why that one never made the grade, but I love it. Maybe the lyrics, maybe they thought the lyrics were too much. I don't ever want to come down. Maybe too drug controversial. I don't know. But a great tune, great singing by Roky, and hey, you get to hear the jug again. Now, after the Elevators kind of fall apart, and it gets really, really crazy. Roky gets busted for marijuana possession, and he manages to kind of convince them that he got off with a not guilty plea by reason of insanity. So he ended up going into a mental institution, and a lot of strange things happened. Electroshock therapy, apparently, and he was in there for a few years. I believe 2 or 3 years, and it was not a good thing for the guy, right? I think he had taken a lot of acid in the 60s, and I believe there were mental issues already. So it's quite the conundrum of events here. He gets out in the early 70s, and nothing really happens for a while. He's just kind of, he's writing songs, he's written songs, he's even recorded stuff while he was in the institution, just on a cheap recorder, him playing acoustic songs. He never stopped writing songs, that's for sure. So what happened, though, is that he finally kind of around 75 or so, he kind of starts to kind of get things get back together again, and he makes a deal with Rhino Records, who are really just starting out at this time. And they're doing reissues, and they are putting out new stuff, and a lot of quirkiness. Rhino likes quirky stuff. They're putting out records by wrestlers like Fred Blassie, or Barnes and Barnes with novelty songs like Fish Heads. So they kind of want stuff off the beaten path. So they actually put out a 45, Roky Erickson. I think this might have been the first official release after the Elevators. And it was a song called Bermuda, backed with another song called The Interpreter. And that kind of gets things rolling. And it's different. It's not like Elevators music. Now he's kind of like much more, he's got more of a hard rock sound, almost foreshadowing punk to a certain degree. And it's definitely more rock and roll. And the thing with Bermuda, it's about the Bermuda Triangle. And we're actually going to hear a version of it. He recorded it a second time. We're going to hear that version later on here. So you can stay tuned for that. But this kind of begins this whole thing with Roky starting to write songs, and he's really obsessed with horror movies and stuff like that. And so it's 1981, and I'm reading Cream magazine. And to me, I'm going to just do a side note here. Cream magazine was the best rock and roll magazine ever. There's never been anything like it. In fact, probably in the PC era that we live in now, you couldn't have a magazine like Cream, because Cream lived 95% of the time to offend. But the thing about them was they didn't just pander to the big rock and roll stars. They covered lots of different genres of music. Yes, they wrote articles that were somewhat abusive to the artists they didn't like, but at least they were honest. They were giving you an honest opinion of how they felt about these artists. And they were just clever guys. It was based out of Detroit. So it had definitely more of a hard edge rock and roll attitude, right? Because, you think of the music that comes from that era, MC5, Stooges, Ted Nugent, Mitch Ryder, all that kind of stuff. So they had a lot of attitude. They loved to make fun of Canada, which I always thought was amazing. I love the way Cream magazine made fun of Canada. Like, when they had, it was great. In fact, I think it's in this issue here, the same issue with the Roky Erickson story. Yeah, if you look there, Rush, they have an article on Rush. And then if you look underneath it, it says, Rush, what's the hurry? Like, if they didn't like a band, they would make fun of them. And so they were really clever. And I'm reading this. I used to buy it every month when it came out because I just loved it so much. They covered new music, they covered old music, and they had tons of attitude. Like, they would always have this page at the back here, backstage, where they would just take outrageous photos of rock stars and write really ridiculous, sarcastic, smart-ass comments on the photos. It was great. They were a great magazine. So I'm reading this one day, and it's got it on the front here, 13th Floor Elevators, Roky Erickson, 1981 update. And I'm like, oh, wow, I got to read that. So here's the article right here. Yes, I kept this ever since my days of high school, if you can believe it. This article, The Psychedelic Sounds of Roky Erickson. And at this point, grade 11 high school, I'm really into the psychedelic stuff. I'm just craving that stuff. Having a hard time finding the records, though, because the early 80s, a lot of the stuff is out of print. And there's no internet back then, kiddies. And so I read this article, and it's fascinating. The writer, Greg Turner, wrote quite a bit of rock stuff back then. He tells the story of the 13th Floor Elevators and what happened to Roky and everything. And then he meets them to interview him, and they're talking about he'd done some new recordings. And Roky is just telling these, these outrageous stories about how he likes scary things. He loves horror movies. He loves horror comic books and stuff like that. And he thinks scary is better. He likes scary a lot. And he's also convinced that he's an alien from another planet. And his reasoning for this, he explains in the article here. And it's really, really strange. He said his mother told him this. His mother was the one that told him he was an alien. And that she explained it like this, in that she said to him, what did you used to call me? And he said, Ma. And she said, yeah. And then it was like, and then she went, okay, and what's the first letter of your name? And he said, R for Roky. And she said, yeah. And then she said, what letter comes after R? And he said S. And then if you put that all together, it spells Mars. And that apparently was how Roky explained that he was an alien from Mars. So you've got a genuine character here. I'm reading this article. He's talking about the new songs all around horror movies. When I was a kid in high school, I loved horror movies. And this is back in the era before TV late at night was filled with infomercials, and horror movies were on all the time late at night. I used to spend my weekends staying up till 4 a.m. watching horror movies, and bad ones, really bad ones, you know, like the type Frank Zappa sang about in Cheapness. Those kind of bad movies. And he's listing the titles here of Rocky's songs, and one's called Creature with the Atom Brain, and one's called Night of the Vampire, and one's called Stand for the Fire Demon, and one's called The Bloody Hammer. And I'm like, this sounds amazing. I'm like, this sounds amazing. And then, you know, of course, the context of being psychedelic and that is one thing I will say the article did kind of mislead me, and I thought his new album would be psychedelic. So anyways, I went looking, I tried to find it, and one of my record buying trips to the big city, because I lived in a small town, and we would drive to Toronto and Hamilton to get records. One day I'm in a record store, and like, there it is. I find the Roky Erickson album, finally. And I'm just like, I'm super excited. I can't believe it. And I distinctly remember having to bum the money for it off my buddy, because I had already spent all my money on records already. And I'm like, I just want this one more record, please. So he gave me the money, and I got it. And this is it here. It was called The Evil One, Roky Erickson and the Aliens. Now, I was a little confused when I got it, because the album that he talked about in the article, the record cover, he said, was garish, kind of like horror psychedelic, with Rocky's face split in half and monsters and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, that doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like that at all. It looks pretty, it's like kind of 50s. Looks more like you see something in a 50s horror movie, right? So I was a little bit confused. And it wasn't until years later that I found the one they were talking about. This is how the album came out first, with this cover. And then it came out with this cover. And also the thing is, too, they have different selections of songs. They do have songs, some that are on both, but they also have songs that are only on one and not the other. And this is, I guess, what happened is that the record got picked up in England by CBS UK, and it was out on a big label. CBS in the UK put it out. But I guess in North America, CBS didn't want to put it out, and it got licensed to a much smaller company. You can see there at the bottom. 415 Records. They got the license to them, but the tracks are mixed up. Like I said, there's certain tracks that are on this one that aren't on the other one. But for me, it didn't matter. Like, you know, and it's funny because this is really the stuff I got into first before the 13th Floor Elevators. I mean, I knew who they were. I'd heard You're Gonna Miss Me, but I didn't have any other records. This was my first excursion just from reading that article and being able to find this. And I was instantly blown away, like completely blown away. I mean, it was good. It wasn't psychedelic. I was disappointed by that, but it was good, straight up rock and roll. And the lyrics were fantastic. And the performances were great. He had this guy named Bill Miller playing the auto harp. And this guy, Dwayne Eckelson, plays the lead guitar, a very good guitar player. And the album is produced by, of all people, by Stu Cook, who was the drummer in CCR. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. And he did do a great job with the production. He really, really did. The records sound great. So they really, really grew on me. And eventually I went in, got into the 13th Floor Elevators and got all those records as well. But I really came to Roky Erickson by his solo work. And that's why I want to play some of them. So we're going to start playing some of the songs from these two here. Now, the first one I want to play is the song that leads off this version. If you bought this album with this cover, look at that cover. That's freaking crazy. If you had bought this, and the first song, you drop the needle, you get it home, and the first song is called Two-Headed Dog. It is amazing. It is one of Rocky's crunchiest rockers. So let's hear it. The story of the Two-Headed Dog.
Two-headed dog, I'd be working in the Kremlin with a two-headed dog.
right, how about that, eh? The two-headed dog. He's working in the Kremlin with a two-headed dog. Horror and Soviet propaganda paranoia mixed together. How about that? Absolutely amazing. So, you know, and it's funny because, again, this is the album I bought first. So I didn't hear Two-Headed Dog for a while. I didn't hear it right away like I heard the ones on this one. So next up, I want to play one that's on this one because this, like I said, this is the one that got me really, really into it. And this tune is really one of my favorite ones here. I got to play this one next. There's a tune on here called Bloody Hammer, and it just has some of the greatest lyrics. And listen near the end of the song. He gets into some great stuff. You got to hear about the baby ghost with the chain and the bloody hammer. But again, pretty nasty song lyric-wise, but great rock and roll and super catchy. And it's going to hammer your mind out. It's going to hammer your mind out, the bloody hammer. So let's get into it. Roky Erickson and the Aliens with the bloody hammer.
To the left, my eye turns to the left to say no. He said first I am a special one. I never hammer my mind out. I never have that bloody hammer. I never have that bloody hammer. I never have that bloody hammer. I never have the bloody. I never have that bloody. I never have that bloody hammer. I am the doctor.
right, so there you go. The Bloody Hammer. The Baby Ghost. The Baby Ghost from the 1900s says, swing your chain, baby. I love that. The Baby Ghost from the 1800s, man. He just has this crazy, vivid imagery. It's obvious that he was into horror ever since he was a little kid. There's no doubt about it. But he manifests it so well in these songs, and they are incredibly catchy songs, and he does come up with great lyrics. Now, this next tune is really, I would say the next one I'm going to play is almost the epitome of Rocky's blend of rock and roll with horror movies. Because with this song, honestly, he makes a little movie. Like, he makes a little rock and roll musical movie with what he does in this song. And you'll hear, I'm playing all of these. I'm playing the whole song. We're going all the way out on all of these. So, and this one was named after a horror movie as well. It's called Creature with the Atom Brain. And this is really great the way he constructs it with the verses, choruses, and then he has these bridges, lots of uses of sound effects and voices and talking to kind of move the story along with what he's singing. So it's great. It's like a little friggin' movie as a song. So let's, get some popcorn, get comfortable, because playing now in the theater of the mind, it's The Creature with the Atom Brain. listening to a movie, almost like a little movie soundtrack in a song there. I love that. You know, he might have been messed up and had issues, that's for sure, Roky Erickson. But man, oh man, he could put together those songs. They sound so great. So, anyways, these two records together, both called The Evil One, they are great. I believe you can get them as one now, or I think there was an issue that came out that put all the songs together onto one sort of package. So you should check it out, because this is really the highlights of his career. I could play like every song on these records, and you'd love them all. So you should definitely check that out. But I want to play a couple other ones from other parts of his career as well. This is cool. I just want to show you this one for the cover. This is an EP that came out only in France, but I love that cover. I've always loved the cover. And it's only got like 5 songs on it. And one of them, too, which is actually great, it's called Starry Eyes. It's kind of a break from the whole monster thing. And it's actually very much like Buddy Holly. Like, it totally reminds me of Buddy Holly, because I think Roky liked the early days of rock and roll as well. So that was a cool little EP. That was on like New Rose in France. Great little, I love that cover. It's what a great painting of him. So that was cool. Now the next one that I want to play, though, was off an album. Again, he had a lot of issues. Like, there would be ebbs and flows in Rocky's career, right? Like, because after he did The Evil One, he did play quite a bit of shows for 2 or 3 years, certainly around the Texas area, and that he played lots of them. There's been releases from those eras of live stuff that's really quite good. And he managed to work out some deals after a while, but there would always be gaps, because certain things would happen in his life. Maybe there would be some health issues or some mental issues. I mean, you're lots of times reading it, you'd read stories about him, and it'd be like, some writer goes to see him, and he's in a house full of TVs with all of them changed to a different channel, and it's all like weird white noise. And there was a lot of weird things going on, but stuff would show up every once in a while, and it would always be great. And this album here was the next one. He signed a deal with Enigma Records at the time that had a sub-label called Pink Dust. And this was the first one they put out on that. It's called Don't Slander Me. And there's a couple on here. Remember I mentioned earlier that he did a 45 with Rhino called Bermuda. Well, on this one, he re-records that song. And I think the version on here really is fantastic. The lyrics are great. The intensity is there. His great singing is there. And hey, man, how many other songs, rock and roll songs, do you know about the Bermuda Triangle? Yeah, that's right. 0! So, let's take a breather here and get into some more rock and roll with Roky Erickson and take a trip down to Bermuda.
Are you going to Bermuda?
tripping down to Bermuda. Makes, I don't know, gives you a weird impression of the Bermuda Triangle, doesn't it? There's too much sperm. What's he going on about there? But that was the great thing about Roky Erickson. And he had these great lyrics, unique vision, definitely had his own perspective. That's one thing I love about him. He was definitely a unique character, that's for sure. Now, there was another record that came out on Pink Dust as well that I really like, and it's this one here. It's called Gremlins Have Pictures. I like that kind of old school album jacket there. And this was just kind of an odds and ends collection. There's some live tracks on here, like there's a couple of live versions of songs from The Evil One, like Night of the Vampire, and Cold Night for Alligators is on here. There's a wicked cover of the Velvet Underground's Heroin. Really good, really intense. Roky just screaming his guts out in the band. They're just wailing on that. It's live. Really, really, really good. And other songs that would even pop up later in his career, like John Lawman, when he did his album in the 2000s with the band Overkill River. They did a version of John Lawman. So I want to play one of the tunes off here because it's a really neat mix because it's got rockin' tunes and then it has some acoustic and more mellow things that he did in different phases. And there's one on here that I have always really liked, and it's called I Have Always Been Here Before. And it's a bit of a break. I mean, I've just played you like 4 monster horror ones kind of in a row. So I wanted you to kind of get the other side of Roky, the more melodic, the mystical side. And this one really captures that well. It was done in the studio. It's very simple. It's just Roky and a couple other performances. But one of those things that he always, I'm an alien, I'm of another time. And so here he's telling us, I have always been here before. I love his turn of a phrase. So let's hear it. Roky Erickson here. I have always been here before.
It seems like a bell rings, time for deja vu. Everything is familiar, being here with you. All you've ever had before, you've had to understand. Now all you have to do is want to have at your command. I have always been here before, allowing my mind's call of no. Incorporate more, never stops this flow. I have always been here before. That is pleasing, that is real, that is forever keeps filling, never filled, that snuck up upon you in the night, that you remember in an early childhood light, that was supposed to have frightened you, but somehow you never took to fright. I have always been here before, allowing my mind's call of no love. Incorporate more, never stops this flow. I have always been here before. From the gargoyles to Stonehenge, from the Sphinx to the pyramids, Lucifer's temples praising the devil right, to the devil's clock as it strikes midnight. I have always been here before, allowing my mind's call of no love. Incorporate more, never stops this flow. I have always been here before.
Yeah, I like that tune. It's just a bit, definitely more mellow and more of a philosophical, mystical kind of thing. And Rocky, he would keep things really simple with a lot of the songs too. He would kind of just get a very simple idea going and then just kind of play with it like that. So I like that tune a lot. Now, things got sporadic, like I said, through the years. There's always these records where they would compile demos or just very low-end recordings, like this one here, Never Say Goodbye. There was this one, All That May Do My Rhyme. Sorry, I can't show you the cover because this is actually a promo copy that doesn't have a cover. But as you can see, some of these are tunes that would still had shown up before in the past, and they're kind of just different versions or reworkings. And he had a lot of troubles. And it wasn't until the early 2000s that Rocky he has a couple of brothers, and one of his brothers had to actually kind of intervene. Rocky was living with his mother. And the story seems to be, and if you want to hear more about this story, you need to watch this documentary, You're Gonna Miss Me. Very good documentary, and explains the whole kind of resurrection of Roky Erickson. He was living with his mother for a long time, who apparently also had mental health issues, and was somehow sabotaging his medicine and what he was supposed to get in order to kind of keep him at home with her. And his brother actually came and got him out of the situation and got him the medication he was supposed to be taking, and things started to turn around for him, so much so that it got to the part where he was doing things, and he started to play, and he toured. Roky Erickson toured. He was one of those guys that I never thought that would happen. He actually played up here in my neck of the woods. I've seen him 3 times. It was really fantastic. I mean, sure, age and the past had kind of caught up with him, but he still was great with the songs. His voice, I thought his voice sounded great, and it was so good to hear. You getting to hear songs like Bloody Hammer or Creature with the Atom Brain, and he would always do She's Gonna Miss Me too, which was really fantastic. So it was great that in that later part of his life, he ended up getting that period where he could go out and do stuff. And he even did a record. This is great. This is with a band called Overkill River. This is the cover here. I love that cover. And what they did, some of the tunes are that they just created new music and put it over top of demos that Rocky had done, like really, some of them really cheap acoustic recordings he had done, when he was in the mental hospital or on his own and stuff. And then some of them, Rocky had just recorded them with an acoustic guitar with him singing, and they would add all the extra music. And it's really quite a good modern, this I would say is definitely psychedelic, right? This is a psychedelic record. And if you like this band and you like Roky Erickson, I think you'd really dig it. It actually turned out quite well. And it's the last kind of official kind of recording that we have from Roky Erickson. But man, oh man, what a character. He left his mark. There are some great live albums that you can get too. This is one that came out a few years ago in the 2000s. Rocky, because from 79 to 81, like I said earlier, he played a lot. He did a lot of live shows. And this one is a really good compilation of different shows from Austin, Texas, and other parts of the United States. And a lot of the songs from the Evil One, because even in the 2000s, he would focus a lot on that Evil One stuff. Like I think he knew that people wanted to hear those tunes, and he could still remember how to play them, which was great as well. But, it's a tough one for me. I loved his music ever since I was, in high school. And I just think he was so talented, entertaining. He's got tons of great music. So please, if you dug this, go out and check out more of Roky Erickson's music. I'm so happy that he had that last stage of his life where he did get to go out and play and do things again and kind of live a somewhat normal life after the chaotic, 20, 30 years preceding that. I want to go out. I didn't play it off the top because, like I said, everybody knows it and everything. But you know what? Rocky always did it live. And I have a really good live version of him doing it. This came out, I think, sometime in either late 80s or early 90s, because that's when the performances are from, the late 70s, I guess. But this is what it's called. Between the Ruins. And it's with the band The Explosives. He had several different bands that he played live with, the Aliens, Explosives. And this one it's just really, really good. I don't know if it's a bootleg. I don't know if it was an authorized issue. But the recordings are really well. They're really good. And Rocky's at his finest. He's roaring and shouting and carrying on. And they're doing Bloody Hammer and Creature with the Atom Brain and The Wind and More. You know, Night of the Vampire. They're all on here. But I'm going to play you his version there of the 13th Floor Elevators classic, She's Gonna Miss Me, because this version is so good. The band just kicks it out. Rocky howls it out. It really rocks. And I think it's a fitting way to go out here. So we're going to end things off with Rocky Live, and You're Gonna Miss Me. And I want to thank everybody for watching these videos. And please check out the music of Roky Erickson. Check out the documentary, You're Gonna Miss Me. There's also another one on YouTube that you can watch called Demon Angel, which is also a pretty interesting portrait of Rocky. And yeah, check out his music. He's gone, but he will never be forgotten. Thanks for watching. You can check me out on Instagram and Facebook. And I want to thank Kevin McDonald, as always, for doing a great job and making these videos all look spiffy. Because, look at me, I couldn't make anything look spiffy. I can make things look spliffy, but not spiffy. All right, so that's it. I'm out of here. Let's go. Roky Erickson and the Explosives, and You're Gonna Miss Me.
This is that old hymn, an old church hymn they play in old Baptist church houses on a little old wooden piano, organ. You gotta wake up one morning as the sun greets the dawn. You gotta look around in your mind, girl. You gotta find that I'm gone. You didn't realize. You didn't realize. You didn't realize. You didn't realize. Why you gonna miss me, baby? Why you gonna miss me, baby? The warning, but you never heeded him. How can you say you miss my loving hand when you never needed him? You're gonna wake up wondering, find yourself all alone. What's gonna stop you, baby? I'm not coming home. I'm not coming home. I'm not coming home. Wow! Miss me, baby. You're gonna miss me, Tom. Yeah.
God, I miss him already.